Remember this spot? I was in this spot late spring, early summer this year, and I was standing stump back there behind me about 25 yards. I stood there. I think I had the camera a little far back, and those deer got up and were walking around directly behind me. I didn't have a clue they were there. Well, I'm at the exact same spot now, and I'm back home. I am somewhere between Squamish and Parliament in British Columbia, and there's snow here. It's getting cold rapidly. The snow line's just hammered down to the bottom of the valley rapidly, which is pretty exciting for me for hunting this fall. And I don't know, another week and a bit, I'm really going to start picking up. I'll probably be hunting every single day in the mountains. But in the meantime, I'm going to explain to you guys and show you guys the video I took on that last trip. I think I discussed it in the previous video, not the hunting videos, the moose videos. But I explained to everybody how when you are in the woods hunting, like myself and thousands of other people just like me, you don't miss too much. You're always on the look for the sign of the game, right? Also take note, I'm also a licensed trapper. I'm not a fur trapper. I've never been into fur trapping myself, so it's not my gig, but I am a licensed trapper, and I specialize in dealing with problem wolves and the overabundance of wolves when that occurs. Okay, so take note, and a lot of you people that are familiar with trapping, you'll also know that when you are doing that, you're non-stop looking for sign, tracks, marks in the snow, on the mud, on trees, on branches, on anything. You're non-stop looking, and it becomes second nature. It's just second nature. You don't even think about it, but you're doing it. And also take note that when you, unfortunately, I will say it unfortunately because it's almost like having a life sentence in a way, when you run into one of these beings, become aware of them on your own, it changes everything. It changes everything. There's no way getting out of it. And then you become almost doubly aware of your surroundings, the marks on the ground, the sign, and more so at times the sounds. It's the sounds that I listen to. I find that I listen to sounds innocently a lot more than I did typically previous. And I'm not just listening for the grunt of a deer or a bugle of an elk or the grunt of a moose or the growl of a bear. You're listening to other sounds which aren't very common, but they do occur. It's going to start raining. It's going to start barfing rain or snow or both. So I'll try to get this done as soon as I can. So I did take, while on this last trip I ran into that area. Well, first this is how it went down. There's a particular zone where you got to take a quad through a real tight old trail. I think it's originated from the local trapper up there, because you can see where his marten boxes are on trees along the way. It's a trap line, registered trap line. And you travel through this old quad trail, I don't know, for about 5 or 6 miles. And then what you'll do is, what I do is I park back in the heavy timber. And I park back in the heavy timber. I try to time it so I'm at least a half an hour, 45 minutes of darkness before the sun comes up for seeing light. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stand there, be silent. If the sound of the quad or myself or the truck or horses or whatever, if it made noises or disrupted the nature in the dark in that immediate area, or within earshot of where I'm stopping, I want whatever heard me to have that good solid half hour, 45 minutes of darkness and dead silence to go back to just doing what they're doing and forget all about me arriving. And that's why I do that. And I'll bring a good mug of coffee with me in the backpack, and I will peel out the coffee and sit there in dead silence, whether I'm by myself or somebody else, and I'll have a coffee and I'll listen. And what I'm hoping for to happen is, if I'm hunting elk, I want a big mature bull elk to bugle on his own without me bugling, calling to make him call. I want him to give it up first. Or a moose, I want the moose to give it up first. I want the prey that I'm after to give it up first to where that they're there, or their location is. And I don't want them to be aware of me, if I can. And that is a big advantage to me, because then I can guess how far away from them they are from me, and I will figure out which way the wind's going, guess roughly where they are, and then I will slowly, silently make my way to as close as I can to them before I mimic their call and let them become aware of me. Because when you do that, if you can sneak into these bulls tight without them knowing, and then let a rip or bugle or grunt go, it triggers them like instantly, and they're coming to kick your ass. Whereas, on the other hand, if I let out a ripper elk bugle or moose grunt from a long ways away, and that bull possibly has cows with him, and he's mature and he knows how the game works, he's going to look towards the call of me, know I'm quite a ways away, and he's going to think, what the hell am I going to invite that guy over to kick my ass for? I'm going to take these girls and get out of here quietly. And there's a potential for him doing that. So that explains what I'm doing when I arrive to my spot half an hour, 45 minutes early in the dark. So we did that again. I did that last year too. If you saw that video when I went and harvested that elk by myself, I went up north by myself and camped, and coincidentally had an odd night there. I think I heard about maybe 6 trees fall down during the night with no wind, no rain, no anything. It was freezing cold. I think it was minus 10. That time I went back up, and that was a little odd. Whatever. But it kept me up fairly often. Every single time I poked my head out of the tent or woke, the drum of a grouse would come out loud all through the middle of the night. Whether it was a grouse or not, who knows? Was it mimicked? I don't know. Probably. Not losing too much sleep over it. But I'm just taking note of those items that I'm aware of. Who wakes up all through the night, 11 at night, midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and every single you wake up to go pee or do whatever, does a grouse drum? Birds don't do that, as you know, especially you turkey hunters. Turkeys don't gobble all through the night, right? It's when the sun's coming up. But anyway, I took note of that. One time going through that remote quad trail coming out last year, I do recall all of a sudden feeling like every single piece of hair on my body was on wire, and it felt like something was right frickin' behind me the whole way out. It freaked the living shit out of me. And I don't normally get that. That normally doesn't happen to me. As an example, I drove 14, 16 hours to get up there by myself. I camped by myself. I went in there. I've been in there, I don't know how many times over the years. I've never had that feeling. But last year, that one time in the dark at nighttime coming out, my head was frickin' spinning. But you take note of those times in your life. You take note of when those things happen, where they happen, when they happen, and you don't forget it, especially when you're going in there again. But this one particular morning, a couple weeks ago, we went in there, did the run in the dark, parked, got the coffees out, drank them, listened, nothing. Stalked up into this area, which is exactly what I did last year to harvest that elk. Stalked into where those elk were last year, exactly a year ago. Nothing was there. The sun came up, it was a little warm, hung out for a little bit, hiked up the road, hiked back, and then I told my partner to stay here with the backpacks and the gear, and I would hike all the way back into the timber and retrieve the quad and then ride it all the way back to him. And then we're going to carry on a few more miles that direction to go hunt another far corner of the area, and also go retrieve a trail camera that I had set there previously, 8 feet up a tree. So when I walked back to the quad and then I got back, and my buddy said flat out, he says, "Did you hear that? Did you hear an elk?" He's like, "No, something beating on a tree." And he heard what he described as, this sounded like a sledgehammer being wailed against a tree, but far too loud and far too powerful for it to be a human being. And he said it hit the tree a few times, loud and crisp. It was no wind that morning, just dead still air. Oh, and that's another thing too. When we did park the quad, I took note to myself. This friend of mine, he's not into the Sasquatch topic. He's never seen one. I think he's had an experience with one previously when he was running near Whistler one time, but it's another story. And I did take note when we were standing by the quad having coffee, it was so eerie, dead quiet. It was ridiculous. You could only hear your blood pumping between your ears. It was so quiet. And I remember taking note of that. It was just dead quiet. I mean, the birds weren't waking up. Normally the birds wake up, the squirrels wake up, the forest comes alive, you hear the sounds. Didn't hear a thing. And then I retrieved a quad, came back, he said he heard the tree getting beat on 3 or 4 times, and then pause, and then 2 more blasts in the tree. And at first I thought he meant he heard it off in the distance pointing that way, where the quad was that way. But then he said, no, it was from where you were. Right, he said it came direct from where you were. I'm like, what? I didn't hear nothing, man. I didn't hear a thing, which is odd. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine just the other day in email, where he's talking about how some people's hearing gets chopped from certain sounds at certain times with different occurrences with some odd episodes. Talk about that later. That was kind of odd, but for me, I know exactly what did it, and it wasn't, I wasn't amused. It's not a fun item to have going on for me when I'm focused on elk hunting or hunting. I just don't need that shit. I don't need to be escorted out of where I want to hunt. I don't need my hunt ruined. I just don't need it. I'm over it. I've had it happen a handful of times now. I don't need it. And I've said out loud more than a few times by myself, I'm just here to hunt. I'm here to get my food. I'm not here to expose you, seek you, or get a picture of you or preview to anybody or share your location. I don't care about you. Just let's leave each other alone. And that's how I carry myself, and that's what I've said out loud a few times when I go to places I don't normally frequent all the time, like I do right here. And then we carried on, went down the trail, got to where the trail camera was, and the trail camera, which is set on a tree, I put a stick behind it all the time. It was spun right around, about a quarter of the way around the tree to face the next tree beside it, which was only 2 feet away in a trunk like that. And we were the only ones in there since the camera had been set. And I'm like, well, that sucks. You know, there was 2 or 3 videos of myself on there and a bull moose walked through there, and that was it. The camera didn't trigger when it was spun. The batteries were dead. It's a brand new camera, one that I firmly stand behind. And that was a lot. The batteries being, you know, the camera being spun, okay, fine. It could have been a moose and his antlers. I've had moose and elk bash the shit out of my cameras before. I've had black-tailed deer bash the shit out of them. But that little branch I balance in there to keep it on an angle, pointing down, that stick should not have stayed behind that camera when it was spun around, if it was done by antlers. Whatever, it wasn't done by a bear. There's no teeth marks on it. There's no claw marks in the tree. Nothing to lose sleep about, right? So I moved the camera, replenished the batteries, and then we went on a big, long, deep timber hunt off not too far from the Peace River. We hunted the banks, the breaks above the Peace River in timber on the, what side were we on? We're on the southwest side of the river, I guess, at that point of the river. And nothing, didn't see a thing. We did push a couple of, I think, elk came jumping out of the bush. We just heard something crashing through the bush below us at one point. Didn't feel alarmed, didn't feel any stress or heaviness from that area. And then went around about a mile and then did a long hike back through thick, previously logged off area with small hardwood trees growing up in the area. And then all of a sudden, by fluke, before we got to the road, which is another 300 yards farther, we came to this area where I don't know how many trees were snapped off at head height. Cleanly snapped right off. And there wasn't one mark on the bark. Nothing. No teeth marks, no antler rub marks, no claw marks, no nothing. And some of those trees were, I guess, size of my wrist, maybe a little bigger, and they were snapped right off. All consistently at around head height, 6 to 7 feet tall off the ground. And you could see where whoever it was that came into that patch, you could see where he snapped them coming in. He either snapped the trees coming in or snapped them going out after demolishing this area of about, I'd say it was about 15 by 15 meters round. The grass in these trees, we're conditioning it at the height of it in the greenery. And you come into here, and all this grass has been stomped down and it's dead. Do you notice that? Yeah. All the grass in these trees is stomped down dead. And beside it, it's all upstanding, thick and green and lush. So whatever was in here stomped down a lot of freaking grass while they were making their little display or doing whatever the hell's going on. I don't know. Whatever. There's a lot of destruction here. I don't know what did this. It's not antlers.
What a mess, eh? It's just really weird.
That's hard to snap.
Look at this, it's snapped twice. Snapped twice, and there's no antler marks on it. Weird, eh? Whatever, is what it is. This little group of trees looks like they're all just grabbed together like a bouquet and thrown down, eh? These ones right here. Look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in a bouquet. Ripped up and thrown in a stack. Alright, onward. I'm good.
Alright, so this is definitely, obviously it's rubbed by antlers. What would I say this was? Probably high probability it was a moose. Elk do the same things, same willow too, right? So could have been a big elk, but going by these snapped, the girth of these snapped ones here. That one could have been a big bull elk, might be on a moose, but either way, this is what it looks like when antlers break trees in half. All right, there's the bark's shredded, rubbed right off, the whole length, shredded. See, this is just shredded, blown up and shredded, all from antlers, scraped up and down, scraped up and down. There's scrape marks everywhere. You see the bark's just chiseled right down. And that is what it looks like when a tree gets destroyed from antlers. All right, it doesn't look like, it'll never look any different. If a bull came in and say wanted to snap this in half clean without leaving one mark on that bark, it's literally impossible unless he wrapped his mouth around it with his gums to block his teeth from penetrating the bark, and he went and snapped it with his mouth and not using teeth. And here's the tops. The same thing. I mean, here's the top of it. Even with this, you can see where it took a whole pile of rubbing first, all the way around. You can see where the bark's rubbed off. Small branches are beat off. This is rubbed off. It's all 100% done by antlers. Okay? So you can see the clear, obvious difference in these 30 or so trees that you can see in this other video clip. How they're all cleanly broken in half, and all the bark is perfect, and there wasn't one scrape mark, tooth mark, claw mark, antler mark on it at all. And what makes it really apparent and obvious what did it, especially the heavier one that was broken in 3 different places. So that absolutely eliminates snow load. But looking at the grass pounded down in the area with the 30 trees blasted in half. The grass is all pounded down. The grass next to it and the other trees is up, green, you know, kind of brown and green, but it's alive. And there you go. That's what we found. And take it for what you will, is what it is. But I can guarantee you, I know what it wasn't. There you go. And there's even one spot, I videotaped it all. There's a spot where a handful of these trees were just, boom, thrown down in one stack. One tree, one of the heavier ones, was broken 1, 2, 3 times. So the top was snapped off, but it was left by a thread of bark, and it was hanging. And, oh no, the top was snapped completely off and gone. And then another chunk of about 3 or 4 feet of it was broken off again and hanging by a thread of bark. And then the base of it was mulched, like psh, psh, psh. It wasn't broken clean enough for it to lay down. It was still standing, but you just grab by your fingers and go like this. And that was the one I was almost tempted to cut that off if I had a handsaw, something with me to take it home, because that was absolutely bizarre. And the strength it took to snap these trees off, a human being couldn't have done it. And is what it is. I know what didn't do it. I will bet my life on it. It was no elk, no moose, no grizzly bear, no deer. All right. So, and it was not a human being. So what does that leave that it was? It is what it is. So another thing too, that display wasn't done for our benefit. That was done a while back And you can see in the video, I videotaped all the grass. It was about this tall on average in that huge, massive patch of these trees. It's a big, long, thick patch of that growth. And you could tell off the side all the grass was still up and green and alive. And that the grass, and you could tell that you can see plainly on the ground, everywhere these trees were snapped off, the grass was stomped flat and dead. So that's a lot of stomping if it was a hoof of a moose that long and that wide, right? Which it wasn't. But anyways, there you go. That's the explanation for what we innocently bumped into, ran into, heard, and saw. And again, I don't look for this shit, but due to the nature of what my task at hand and what I'm doing, I don't miss anything. And again, which I said in that past video, if I see it, it's possibly interesting to a lot of you out there, I'll videotape and share it. It's too easy, right? I always have a camera with me, probably 2 or 3 at all times, no matter what. And there you go. So that's what happened. You can see it in the video. And it was later after that, back at camp, that we went through this old trail. It's actually not far from Trapper Cabin. And both sides of that old trail in was those spruce or pine trees, you know, an average like this to that big and thick on both sides of the road. And when we came out, the top of that tree was laying across the trail, snapped off that thick. All right, take note of what I just said. When we went in, there was no tree on that trail. It was evening hunt, dead silent, no wind, no clouds, unfortunately, because we wanted it to be overcast for hunting. And that was across the trail when we came out. And we glanced at it, I'm like, nice. And we just kept on going. But I did go back there a couple days later because I wanted to find the tree that thing came from. It took a little bit, not a little bit, but because it was kind of camouflage. You're looking up in the trees, looking for it snapped off, and meanwhile, the rest of that tree was laying flat on the ground, uprooted, and that top 16 feet was snapped off and thrown over 40 feet away across the trail. And then I shared that. And then a handful of emotionally challenged wackos blew a gasket. Oh well. Sucks to be those people in that state of mind, isn't it? Imagine going through life that fragile. But anyway, so that's what I saw. That's what I videotaped. And that's why I shared it with all of you here today. Okay? And I will guarantee you, probably hundreds of you out there have seen the same thing.